Everything you've been told about getting in shape assumes that you start work at 9 and finish at 5. Track your calories, meal prep at the weekend, train straight after work. Now try that working 60 hours a week. Try that when you spend 14 hours a day on your feet, surrounded by food, putting everybody else before you with days off that change constantly. It doesn't fit. Of course it doesn't. But when it doesn't fit, you don't think the advice is wrong. You think you are. You think you haven't got the discipline, or you're just not one of those people. But you're not the problem. The advice and those approaches were built for somebody with a completely different routine, a completely different lifestyle to your own. So this video is genuinely everything that I do with my paying clients. Chefs, front of house, shift workers, all condensed into one video with me holding nothing back at all. Which means you can get in shape training 2 or 3 times a week, not 6. It means you don't have to meal prep on a Sunday because you obviously don't get Sundays off. And it means you don't have to give up the pint after work or the food that you enjoy so much just to lose a few pounds. But what it does need is for you to get 4 things right. So before we get into what they are, I'm Cameron, and before I became an online coach, I worked in hospitality for 6 years. Front and back of house, I've done a number of different roles within that industry. So when I say I know what a Saturday double shift looks like, I'm not guessing, I've done that myself. Over the last 2 years, I've worked directly with probably about 100 chefs now, helping them get in the best shape of their lives. About once a month, I run a free 2-week workshop, which has helped 1,500 people with those same problems since I started doing that. All of them working the same kinds of hours that you are, all of them struggling with the same challenges. So everything in this video has already been stress tested with your schedule. But there are a few things that this video isn't, just so you can decide if you're in the right place or not. It's not a diet plan. This isn't going to be a list of foods that you can and can't eat. It's not just be more disciplined, bro, because if discipline was the answer, you'd already be in the best shape of your life. You have no shortage of discipline. You get up and do a job that most people wouldn't last 2 weeks in. And it's not about being perfect and 100% locked in all of the time. You need to be roughly on track most days for a long enough time in order to see some actual results. So before we do anything else, we need to get clear on what you're actually aiming for here. Most people say they want to lose weight when you ask them, but that means different things for different people. And almost nobody spends more than 2 minutes thinking about anything beyond just those 2 words. Because lose weight is almost never what people actually want. You could lose weight by chopping off your arm. You could lose weight by losing 90% of your muscle mass. Fantastic, you've lost 10 kilos, but you're still not going to like the way you look. You're still probably going to look like a bag of milk. What people actually mean is they want to look leaner, more defined. And that kind of look comes from having less body fat on your frame and more muscle mass poking through, basically. So building muscle isn't some separate goal off to the side reserved just for the gym lads. It's what makes losing body fat actually look like what you pictured it to look like. The other thing I hear all the time from the guys I work with and the guys that go through my workshop is they want to have more energy. They want to stop feeling so fucking tired all the time. And I completely get it. Working in hospitality or working in shifts, it's very tough on the body. It takes a pretty heavy toll. But while it sounds counterintuitive, training, exercise, going to the gym, building muscle, fat loss, they all contribute to you having more energy, not less. Yes, hitting the gym makes you more tired in the moment, but over a few weeks, it will actually give you more energy. You sleep better, you feel less wrecked at the end of your shifts as a result of that. Part of that is down to sleep because you're pushing yourself harder in the gym, which means you're probably going to be more tired, more likely to sleep better on a night. Part of it's just fitness. As you get fitter, everything you do takes a smaller slice of what you've got. So a 14-hour shift on a Saturday that used to take 80% of what you had in the tank, a month, 2 months later, might just take 50 or 60% of what you have in the tank. And part of it is just from eating better. Trying to lose weight focuses you to eat healthier and improve your eating habits, which, shock horror, helps you improve your energy. So the health side of things isn't a separate goal either. It comes along for the ride as well. Which is why in this video, I'm going to talk about fat loss as the main goal throughout. Not because it's the only goal that counts, but because it's what most people want and it's upstream of everything else. If you're only bothered about health and energy, I would say that 9 times out of 10, if you focus your efforts on actually losing fat, you will see more progress in that than if you just honed in on health and energy. Because it focuses you more. It gives you a concrete goal to work towards and a way to see your progress towards that goal. Whereas health and energy, it's a bit like, oh, how do I even know if that's improved? If you are more interested in building muscle, putting on some size, getting a bit bigger, everything in this video still stands. All of the principles still apply. You just have to eat more, basically. That's as simple as it is. But this is what I want you to do now, and it only takes about 2 minutes. Get specific about what you're actually after, because I want to lose a little bit of weight is too vague to aim for, and it's too vague to even know when you've made the progress towards that. So how much? Put a number on it. Is it 5 kilos or is it 20? Because those are completely different destinations and they require a different approach to get there. And is it just the weight? And is it just purely the number on the scales? Or do you have a picture in your head of what you want to look like? The footballer's physique is something that I hear all the time. Muscular, defined, but that infamous phrase, not too big. Some people though, just want to feel comfortable in the clothes they wear, in the whites that they wear at work. And they don't really care about anything beyond that. All of those are fine, but they are different targets, and knowing which one you're aiming for changes how you need to set things up. I'm not expecting you to write an essay on what your goal is, but do spend some time thinking about where you want to get to and what that looks like for you. But I want to give you an example of why doing this quick goals exercise is so powerful. So Scott is a client of mine, and he's always been a runner. That was a big part of who he was. But then he ended up injuring his knee, which pretty much stopped him from running, and he never really got back into it. So when we first got talking, what he said wasn't really a fitness goal. He just wanted to get back into running. There wasn't any mention of fat loss or building muscle or anything like that. But getting back into running is pretty vague. So we got specific about what that was. And it was obviously related to his knee. The goal was getting him back running multiple days a week, 2 or 3 days a week to start with. And to do that, we built strength around his knee rather than just piling more running on. So we set that 4-week milestone for what success looked like for him. But this is the bit that matters, right? Once he was training, doing the workouts to strengthen his knee, he started really enjoying it. Then a bit of weight started coming off, and he liked seeing that as well. So the goal changed, and it changed again throughout the entire time that we've worked together. And fast forward to now, after over a year, he's 10 kilos down. He's absolutely loving training, not just for the running, but strength-based workouts as well. And now he wants to dedicate the next few months to purely building muscle and racking up some longer distances with his running. So that's the thing about goals. You're not trying to pick the end destination and never deviate from that. You can't, because you don't know what the process is going to look like to get there, and things will change along the way. You're picking something specific enough to aim at today, because that's what gets you moving in the right direction. And once you're moving, the goals will reveal themselves along the way. Which is why I just want to get consistent again. Doesn't really work. It's not aimed at anything. It's too vague. So pick something specific that you can work towards or work away from right now, whether that's an injury you want to move away from or a goal you want to move towards, but set that specific target and that will get you moving. Okay, the next question is, how long is it actually going to take? Well, it depends on what you've just spent those last few minutes deciding your goal is. As an example, if you've got 5 kilos to lose, or just less than a stone, it'll probably take anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, depending how fast you move, depending how experienced you are with losing body fat, with dieting, everything like that. If you've got 20 kilos to lose, or just over 3 stone, it's going to take more like 6 to 12 months, just to be realistic. It's not an exact science. It depends on a lot of factors, like how much total weight you want to lose. Maybe you've got 5 stone you want to lose over the course of 18, 24 months. It depends how quickly you take to the process. You might just get into a rhythm and start smashing it, or it might take you a bit longer to figure out the foods that work for you and things like that. It can also depend on genetics and training and dieting experience that you've had in the past. Tons of different variables here. But if that sounds slow, if you're thinking 12 months, compare that to what you've been doing so far. Because 6 months or 12 months of something actually working is a lot better than 2 years of stopping and starting and not getting anywhere. And one thing I do want you to be ready for, the first 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks might feel like nothing's happening at all. You'll probably be sore from the gym, you'll be tired, the scales might not actually be moving, you might not be noticing any changes at all. But that's where the foundations are getting laid. It's not the process failing, that's just what the start looks like. And again, everyone's different. That might not happen. You might take to it instantly and start seeing the scales move straight away, but just be aware that it's normal if that doesn't happen. Right, so now you're clear on the goal. This is the roadmap to get there. Training is first because that's the bit that decides what actually happens to your body when you start eating less. Get that wrong and you will just get smaller and skinnier, which nobody wants. But more than that, I consider training to be the first domino of behavior change because once you're in the gym, it gives you a reason to care about nutrition and you don't have to force it anymore. So obviously next is going to be food, because that's where the fat loss actually comes from. And there's one thing that nearly everyone muddles up here, and it's why people end up eating healthy for weeks and don't lose any weight whatsoever. After that is when it's best to start looking at recovery, to basically turn the dials on training and nutrition to make sure they're working as effectively as possible. Most people completely miss that altogether. And finally, we focus on habits, because you can nail those first three and still go nowhere if a couple of things are dragging you backwards. So this is where we plug those leaks. These are in that order deliberately, and you'll see why as we go. Each one only really makes sense once you've got the one before it. So timestamps are in the description. I would recommend watching this all in order the first time, because the chapters build on each other. After that, you can come back to whichever one you need, whenever you need it. So let's start with training then. You don't need to live in the gym to change how your body looks. I know people training 6 days a week who look like shit. And I know people training once or twice a week who look fantastic. The difference isn't the hours spent. It's getting a few specific things right. That's it. So good news if you're busy. It means whatever training you do just has to count. And there are only really 3 things that matter. And if you get them right, every session puts a direct deposit into your progress. So I'm going to show you what those 3 things are, how to nail each one, plus how to actually get yourself through the door when you're tired and you can't be bothered, because that's where basically everybody trips up. So the first thing is technique and precision. This is basically how well you execute each exercise in the gym. So think of it like following a recipe. If you follow it properly and you get the dish you're meant to get. If your technique in the gym is good, the effort actually lands on the muscle you're trying to work instead of it leaking out into the wrong place or potentially even causing an injury. The second is progression. And this is about making your sets harder over time. So this is you basically improving the recipe in front of you. And there's a lot of ways to do that. You could make the recipe in less time. You could improve the flavors. You could use better quality ingredients. And training is exactly the same. There are loads of ways to progress each session, each week. You could add a bit of weight. You could get an extra rep on the set that you do. You could slow the reps down. You could increase the range of motion that you use. You don't have to do all of them at once. You just have to be moving forward session by session. And the third thing is intensity. So this is how hard you actually push a set, how close you go to failure, where you physically can't do any more reps. With the recipe, it's the difference between just going through the motions of the steps and giving it everything to make the best possible version of the dish. So the ingredients are the same, the recipe is the same, but the end product probably isn't. So are you switched on and giving it your all in the sessions, or are you just coasting through? So these 3 are all linked. Good technique allows you to push harder, which is then going to help you progress faster. So they feed into each other. But technique is definitely the first thing to prioritize, because if your form is off, progressing and pushing hard is pretty much pointless. You'll either stall and plateau, or you'll injure yourself. And neither of those things are ideal. But once you're confident with your technique, you can start to focus on progression instead. And then intensity is the cherry on top. So if you're just starting out, intensity is important, but it's not essential. But then as you progress further and further, it does become more and more important. Eventually, if you're not pushing hard enough, you'll probably stop progressing, you'll hit a plateau and you'll stall. So if you can get all 3 of these at once, then you're gonna be flying. But like I said, prioritize technique, then progression, then intensity. But here's why training is important, even if you do just wanna lose weight. Like I said before, people who say they wanna lose weight don't necessarily mean that. They want a more defined look, which is just muscle showing through less fat. So building muscle in the gym isn't a separate goal. It's the thing that makes fat loss look how you want it to. But even more than that, more muscle mass is what helps you keep the weight off after you lose it. We've all heard the statistic that 80 to 90% of dieters put all the weight back on within a few years. But in my opinion, the biggest thing you get from training is an overarching sense of progress. Most people quit a diet or a workout regime because they're too focused on the scales or what they see in the mirror, and those don't end up moving fast enough. So it feels like nothing's happening. But training's different. The gym gives you a scorecard that you can directly impact every single week. You lifted more than last week, that is a win, full stop. There's no arguing with it. And when you're banking a win multiple times a week, you build momentum, and that's what actually keeps you showing up. The motivation, the sense of achievement, the enjoyment of getting better at something. And this was huge for my client, Stephen. Before we worked together, he was definitely not lazy. Football every week, climbing, training in his home gym. On paper, it all sounds fucking brilliant. But he spent about 2 years stuck in exactly the same place with basically no change whatsoever. He was putting the effort in, but his sessions weren't progressing, which means he didn't really enjoy showing up. So he'd struggle to stay consistent each week, especially when his work week was basically split into 4 long shifts and then 3 days off. But the actual problem was that his training was never set up in a way that supported the weekly progress. So we fixed that actual problem. We built him a proper structure around the stuff he already had at home, spaced across his week so he could recover and actually progress on it instead of winging it every single week. And this is the bit that I want you to hear. We went back and forth constantly on his technique and his intensity. He'd send videos over to me. I'd tell him what to change. He'd apply it and maybe send another video, double check if it was working. But it was all about those same 3 things that I've just talked through, just done properly with a back and forth over the course of months. And in the whole time we've worked together, he's maintained the same weight of 80 to 81 kilos, but he's put on a load of muscle. So he's much leaner, as you can see in these photos. He's hitting new personal bests on his squat, bench, pull-ups, pretty much every week at this point. But if Stephen had just judged his progress on the scale, he'd probably have quit, or at least thought that it wasn't working. But his training log told him the truth of it. And once he could see himself getting better every week, showing up stopped being a challenge. And after those 2 years of being stuck, he's finally in control of it. That's the sense of progress that this is all about. So how do you actually improve at those 3? There are a few simple tools. And I mentioned it there, but it's about logging your workouts. This is your scorecard. So write down what you did, the weight, the reps, and then each week, the target is simple. Just beat what you did last week. 1 more rep or a bit more weight. You literally can't progress if you don't know what you did last time. For intensity, you can just do a quick gut check. So after a set, you can ask yourself, could I have done 2 or 3 more reps? If the answer is yes, it probably wasn't hard enough. Simple as that. And the cherry on top, the most powerful thing you can do is what Stephen did, which is film your sets. This is the equivalent of tasting your food when you cook. How can you know what to change if you never check what's actually in front of you? So when you watch it back, there's 2 things to look for. For technique, does the movement change through the set? Do you start cheating towards the end? And are you still hitting a full range of motion on rep 1 and rep 12, for example? For intensity, the main thing to look for is, are your reps slowing down? Because as you get near your limit, which is muscle failure, your reps will involuntarily slow down. So if every rep looks the same easy speed, you probably had more in the tank. If your last rep is 3 times slower than your first one, then you're probably in a really good place intensity-wise. So keep that in mind. But if we just zoom out for a second, right? None of this matters if you don't show up. So there's a couple of things to make that part of it easier. Most of the time, right, when we're tired or unmotivated, we end up talking ourselves out of doing a workout. So instead of feeling like you've got this big 60 or 90 minute session ahead of you, shrink it down. Just focus on the first exercise or the first 3 sets of the whole session. But that's all you need to do to show up. Because if you get there and only do that, that is a win. But you might do that first exercise or those first 3 sets and then realize that you can just carry on with the session. You might as well, since you're already there. But you don't have to. That's the whole point. So shrink it down until it's so small that you can't argue with it. And if you've never tried this, right, just try it and you'll see what I mean. You can Google the 2-minute rule from Atomic Habits and I'll explain it in a bit more detail. And there's one more thing that I saw on Instagram that really landed for me the other day. Just this point that doing 1 set is infinitely better than doing 0 sets. Because I noticed that sometimes when it's close to the end of a session, I'm knackered, it's hot, I just want to get out the gym, but I've got like 2 exercises left. Instead of skipping both of them completely, I'll just do 1 set of each. And I've still shown up and it's infinitely better than doing none of those exercises. But it also works for just getting through the door in the first place. Maybe you haven't got the energy for 3 sets of 6 or 7 different exercises, but 1 set of each, that sounds a lot more doable. 1 set of each still beats none. But one of the most underrated ways to show up is to decide in advance, aka just plan ahead. Don't leave it to how you feel on the day. When your rota comes out or when you know what shifts you work in, plan which days you're training, slot the sessions into your work week where they make the most sense. And make it easy for yourself. Don't put 3 sessions for the week on Friday, Saturday and Sunday, literally the busiest days you've got. Be sensible about it, right? Utilize your days off and the quieter or shorter work days. So before we move on, I just want to run through some questions that I get asked quite often. First off, does exercise order actually matter? Honestly, not massively. If anything, just do your most important or hardest exercise first while you're fresh. But if you have to move things around due to equipment being in use, then it's definitely not the end of the world. Okay, next one is, does it matter if you train 3 days in a row versus spreading them out? Spreading them out is marginally better for recovery, but honestly, you probably won't notice much of a difference. Just do whatever fits your schedule the best. Do you need to be sore for it to have worked? No. Soreness is not the goal, and it's not a reliable sign of anything. Progression each week is the sign that it's working. So literally 3 things: training, intensity, and progression. Track it, film it, push it. Lower the bar so you actually show up, and decide your days in advance. Do that and you're giving yourself the best possible chance at results every single week. But here's the thing. Everything you just did in the gym is a signal. You've told your body to build muscle and hold on to what you've got. Whether it can actually do that comes down to what you feed it, which is why so many people train hard for months and see nothing for it, because the diet never backed it up. So let's sort that out. If you've ever eaten healthy for weeks and not lost a single pound, you're about to find out why. Nutrition isn't actually that complicated, but almost everyone gets one thing wrong, and it's what destroys their results. So let me explain. Your food is doing 2 separate jobs, which is what most people don't realize. So they mix them up and it creates all of this confusion. The first job is affecting your weight and body composition. So fat loss, building muscle, changing how you look. In short, if you eat more, you will gain weight. If you eat less, you will lose weight. Think of that as the engine of the car. The second job is keeping your body running properly. So your energy levels, how you recover, how you feel day to day. This is the oil and the coolant keeping the engine running smoothly. So in a car, obviously the engine makes it go forward. But if you run that engine with no oil and no coolant, it doesn't matter how good or how fast the engine is, it's going to overheat at some point and it's going to fail. So the engine side of nutrition changes your body. The oil lets the engine keep working. You do need both, but they're not doing the same thing. And knowing which is essential to making real progress that actually lasts. So what is in the engine then? So the engine consists of 2 things: how much you eat in a day and how much protein you're getting each day. Those are the 2 main things that impact what you look like. Everything else you've heard about meal timing, whether carbs are good or bad, superfoods, brown bread, none of it matters compared to those 2 things. And when I say how much you're eating, this is what I mean. Let's say your body runs on fuel, which is calories, and it keeps a reserve tank to store that excess fuel, which is body fat. If you put in more fuel than you're burning, then your reserve tank fills up. So you gain weight, you gain body fat. If you put in less fuel than you're burning, then your body's got to make up that shortfall from somewhere. So that's when it dips into the reserve tank, aka the body fat. That's what a calorie deficit is, and it's what causes fat loss to actually happen. So you're not doing anything clever, you're just burning slightly more fuel than you're taking in and doing it consistently enough that your body keeps going back to the reserves. So you can do that by adjusting how much you're eating, by basically dropping something. So you could drop a meal, you could drop a snack, you could drop a pint after work. That's going to reduce your daily intake. You could shrink something, so have the same meals but smaller portions. Or you could swap something. So you could swap for leaner cuts of meat, you could swap for less oil in the pan, or more veg taking up the space in those meals. All of those are ways to eat less. But I'm going to show you the ultimate way to put this into action in a second. So the other half of the engine is protein. And the reason it's important is because it does 2 main jobs. The first is it decides which weight you lose. Because eating less tells your body to lose weight, but it doesn't tell it what weight to lose. On its own, your body might take some from fat and some from muscle, because muscle is expensive to keep hold of, and your body is looking to cut costs at this point. But if you lose muscle, you're going to end up smaller and softer. You'll have roughly the same shape, just less of it. And that's why some people can lose weight and still have a bit of a beer belly. Protein is what helps stop that from happening. 2, it also makes losing weight easier, because protein fills you up more than any other type of food, and it keeps you full for longer. So you're going to be less hungry when you're eating less, and the calorie deficit stops being as much of a willpower problem. But this isn't a bonus. Most people don't fail with a diet because they didn't know what to do. They fail because they were hungry and tired and deviated from the diet or the plan. Protein is what helps with that. So you basically want to build all of your meals around a protein source: chicken, beef, fish, eggs, whatever your version of that is. Breakfast might be some form of eggs, lunch could be some kind of sandwich, dinner can be anything, as long as it's based around a protein source, which it normally tends to be anyway for most people. So that's the engine, right? That's what drives you forward. Now I'm going to explain the oil and the coolant, which is basically the clean and healthy eating side of it. But this is exactly where most people go wrong. They're eating healthy foods, but not losing weight because overall, they're not in a calorie deficit. Yes, brown bread or brown rice is healthier than white bread or white rice. It contains more micronutrients, it's got more good stuff in it for you. But if you just make that swap and don't change how much you're eating, you're still not going to lose weight, even though it's healthier. So this is about what your body's getting from food. It needs a load of small stuff to function and to run smoothly. It needs vitamins, minerals, also known as micronutrients, and it needs fiber as well. And you get that mainly from fruit and veg, but also staying hydrated impacts this, and taking a multivitamin is a really good way to just give yourself an insurance policy, give you that safety net of getting these things in. So that's going to help everything run smoother, just like the oil and the coolant with the engine. You're going to have more energy, you're going to have better recovery, better sleep, you're less likely to feel like death on day 4 of the diet. And this is equally important because an engine only works if you keep running it. If you have to keep stopping because the coolant or the oil runs out, then you're never going to get very far. It's exactly the same if you feel exhausted and rough all the time while you're dieting, you're more likely to give up. So that's how this side of things speeds up your progress, even if it isn't directly impacting it. Now, that's a lot of information there. That's a lot to have to remember. So to keep things simple and easy, there are 3 clean pathways that take the thinking out of the engine and the coolant. First, we've got foundations. So this is entry level. All you have to do is build every meal around a protein source and get at least 1 portion of fruit and veg in every meal. Nothing else really matters with this. No numbers, no weighing things out, no thinking about portion sizes even. And for most people who've never paid attention to any of this, doing that alone will get things moving. Then we've got portions. So this is everything above, and you start to standardize portion sizes and what's on your plate. But at this point, we still don't want to have to worry about weighing things out. So instead, you use quick and easy estimates and guidelines. So as you put in food on your plate, you want a hand-sized amount of protein on there, maybe a fist-sized amount of carbs, and a hand-sized amount of veg. That's going to keep things nicely. And if you keep those same estimates every meal, that gives you a consistent baseline, which means you can actually tell whether the diet's working or not because you've got a standard portion size now. And importantly, once you have that standard portion size, you can adjust that over time. So if you need to eat less to increase the size of the calorie deficit, you can reduce those portion sizes by going from a hand size to a fist size, for example. So you might try to increase the protein on your plate to fill you up more. You could reduce the carbs from a fist size to maybe 3 fingers worth, and then increase the veg as well to bulk it out a bit more. Or you could just make the overall portion on the plate of everything smaller, and that's going to also reduce the calorie amounts in that meal. And then third, we've got precision. This is everything above, but instead of the estimates, you're weighing and tracking now. So this is the most control and the clearest feedback because you can look at the numbers and know. You don't have to think, you don't have to hope, you know exactly where you stand. So this is about weighing everything, tracking it in an app, and it will tell you exactly where you are with calories and protein for each day. From there, you can adjust if you need to. So if you're eating 2,000 calories and still not losing weight, you can adjust that to 1,800. But the further you go with these pathways, the more accurate it gets, but the more effort that it does take. So precision is the most accurate, but it can also be the most tricky to get used to. It can get messy when you don't have the ability to weigh everything out properly. So if you're too busy to worry about that, you might never want to go near it, and you don't necessarily have to, which is the beauty of this. But each pathway works, and the best part of the system is that you can move between them. If you're not quite seeing the progress you want, or it slows down, you can move up to get that bit more accuracy. Or if things are a bit too overwhelming with all the precision, you can move down and hopefully still make progress. So let me give you an example of what this actually looks like then. When I first spoke to Jake, who was a former client, food was the thing that he was most worried about. He told me about his autism and how that affects his food preferences. He can be very particular about flavors and textures. And he assumed that working with a coach meant getting handed a meal plan full of stuff that he'd hate and having to force it down for however many weeks. So instead of me giving him that meal plan that would have never worked for him, I gave him the principles instead, the same ones that I've just given you, plus the tools and some templates to work from. And from that, he built his own set of meals that he actually wanted to eat, that fit around what he can and can't eat. And because of that, he went from nearly 100 kilos down to the mid-80s in 4 months without having to track a single thing. No weighing out, no apps, no numbers. All of those pathways fucking work. He finished up with me about 7 months ago, and he kept going on his own, and I just spoke to him the other week to see how he was, and he's kept all the weight off. He's still training, he's set some new goals, and he's adjusted his training and cardio to match those new goals that he's got. And that's the whole point of this, right? It's not a plan you follow until it runs out. It's a way of thinking about food and training that you can run yourself forever if you want to. But whichever pathway you are on, you do need a way to know if it's actually working. Otherwise, you're just guessing. So you want to weigh yourself regularly and consistently. Ideally every day, but if not, then at least a few times a week. So you want to do that in the morning before you've eaten or drank anything to get an accurate reading. But don't stress over the daily number that shows up on the scales. It can jump around for 100 different reasons. Instead, you want to take an average, and that becomes your golden metric. That weekly average is what you look at every week and whether it's trending down over time. If it is, don't change anything. Just let the process keep working. But if the scale has stalled for a couple of weeks, the average, that's your signal to nudge the deficit down a little bit. That's the feedback loop. You don't need to guess, you adjust based on the data. So just some quick fire questions I get asked all the time about food. Can you eat late at night? Yes. Total calories for the day are what matter the most. It's not about the clock. Just don't have a massive meal right before you go to bed. If it's going to sit on your stomach and mess with your sleep, that's the only thing you need to be careful about. Do you need to cut carbs, and are carbs bad for you? No. Carbs are basically your main energy source for training. It's the calorie deficit that loses the fat, not the cutting carbs. Do you need protein powder or supplements? They're convenient, they do make things a bit easier, but they're not required. It's an easy way to hit your protein, but real food does the same job. But taking a multivitamin is basically an insurance policy for giving your body what it needs. They're pretty cheap to buy, so I would recommend those. Do you have to track calories forever? No. That's exactly what foundations and portions are for. Tracking is a tool for when you want that precision. It's not a life sentence. So the engine is what changes your body. The oil is what keeps it running. So pick the pathway that fits your life, watch the weekly average, and adjust when it stalls. That's literally it. But what most people don't realize is that you don't actually get results in the gym. You get results when you're recovering from the gym. And recovery is the boring bit that everybody ignores. And in hospitality, it's absolutely at the bottom of the pile, which also means it's got the most potential to completely transform your results if you can get it right. So I'm going to explain what recovery actually is and what those small but powerful changes are that you can implement straight away. The best way to understand what it actually is then is to think of your body like a bucket. Stick with me, right? Basically, everything that you do that you could consider tiring puts water in that bucket. So a 12-hour shift, a 10-mile run, a heavy gym session, a week of double shifts, stress at home, all of those add water to the bucket, some things more than others. For example, a 1-mile run isn't as demanding as a 10-miler, and an 8-hour shift isn't as demanding as 14 hours. But if the bucket fills up and it overflows, you're going to feel that. You'll feel exhausted. Everything will ache. You might even get ill. And it also slams the brakes on any progress you're trying to make. In the gym, with dieting, whatever. The scale won't move. Your strength in the gym will stall or even regress because your body can't keep up with all of the demands on it. But obviously you can't have an empty bucket either, because literally anything you do places some kind of demand on the body, and you don't want the bucket too full either. It's about the sweet spot in between. That's how training and workouts do their job, by forcing your body to adapt and also get more efficient at emptying the bucket back out. So training is one of the things that fills the bucket. Recovery is what empties it. And all of the good stuff, so being stronger, leaner, fitter, that's what happens in between. And my client Adam is a great example of this. Before we started, he could not stay consistent no matter what he tried. He'd get into the gym, do a bit here and there, and within a couple of weeks, it would just fizzle out every single time. But it wasn't for a lack of trying. He was going for 5 sessions a week, but that was actually the problem. He was trying to cram those 5 workouts on top of a 50-hour week, and his body just said no. The bucket was permanently overflowing, so he'd push for a few days, hit a wall, and then just fall off completely. So the fix wasn't about having more discipline or trying harder or getting to the gym more. It was less training. We dropped him to 3 days a week, which meant there was enough of a gap between sessions for his body to empty the bucket back out And that's when it all turned around. Because his recovery was in a better place, he could actually push in those sessions. And because he was pushing in those sessions, he started making actual progress with his strength. And because he was progressing with his strength, he finally had a reason to keep showing up. So the consistency that he'd been chasing for years came from doing less, not from doing more or trying harder. And over the course of about 6 months, all of that progress in the gym kept him motivated with food, and the scale dropped about 7 kilos. But his progress photos, as you can see, they show a completely different story. He's lost a ton of body fat and built a huge amount of muscle. So recovery isn't only about sleep, it's about not filling the bucket faster than you can empty it. So rest days, they're not lazy, they have to be part of the plan. You often end up getting more from 3 good sessions in the gym than 5 tired, exhausted ones squeezed in, just like Adam. But that said, one of the biggest levers most people are ignoring is the sleep side of it. So let's fix that. In short, right, the bucket gets emptied out when you sleep. That's what recovery is. It's not about stretching or ice baths or saunas. And you can think of it like your body opening up a tap on the side of that bucket and draining some of the water out down here. So a nice long deep sleep means that more water is going to drain out. You wake up with plenty of room left in the bucket up here and you feel refreshed. Bad sleep means that barely any of that water is going to drain out, and you start the next day with the bucket still close to the top up here. But it's not just about the length of time you sleep for, right? You could be in bed for 8 hours and still drain almost nothing from the bucket if the quality of that sleep is rubbish. So alcohol, screens, if your brain isn't shutting up, that all affects how well you sleep and results in the tap only being half open. But the good news is the bucket isn't a fixed size. So the fitter that you get, the bigger your bucket is going to become. At the start of your journey, you might be working 60 hours a week, feel exhausted from it, and the thought of adding workouts on top seems impossible. But 3 months of consistent training and looking after yourself later, your bucket could be 3 times the size, and those 60 hours a week feel like nothing. You can take more and you can clear it faster. It's why a session that wrecks a beginner is barely going to have an effect on someone who's trained for years. So all this stuff is important for everyone, but more so for you, because shift work fills the bucket more than most jobs does. 12 hours on your feet, going flat out, that takes a toll that a desk job just doesn't. No matter what size your bucket is, a good chunk of it is still going to be taken up by the shifts that you work, which means you have to be smart. You've got to pick your sessions intelligently, don't try and smash yourself every day, and take sleep seriously. Sleep is such a powerful thing, and it affects literally everything. A bad night of sleep and you will wake up hungrier. Your body is going to go hunting for sugar and for quick energy, which could be the pastry mid-morning, it could be the energy drink at 5 p.m. or the takeaway after your shift. They're just empty calories, and it's your body trying to fill a gap that the sleep should have filled. A bad night of sleep also is going to affect your training. You're going to turn up with nothing in the tank, so you're not going to be as strong as normal. You don't push as hard, so your body gets less of a reason to change and build muscle. And if you sleep badly for long enough, chances are you're just going to stop turning up. You'll skip the session, you'll grab the easy food, you'll tell yourself you'll start again on Monday, but we all know how that goes. Monday becomes next month until the next busy period's over, and it just gets kicked further and further down the road. All this to say, basically, that you can eat perfectly, you can train super hard, but still get nowhere, because bad sleep is going to put a cap on it. But if you can sort your sleep out, everything else gets easier and your results get better. So how do you sleep better then? Well, unfortunately, you can't force yourself to sleep. All you can do is get out of your own way. So most of this is about removing what's stopping you. It's not about clever tricks. First off, you want to give yourself a buffer between work and sleep, because most people can't come straight off a hectic shift and fall straight asleep. So give it half an hour, give it an hour of winding down, eat something, have a shower, dim the lights, read a book, watch something calming on TV, get off your phone. It doesn't matter exactly what you do, just that there is a gap there to slow down. Second, and this one's really underrated, right? You want to make the room dark and you want to make it quiet. It's insane how much of a difference this makes. A pitch black room compared to a room where the streetlights can creep through the curtains. Absolute silence compared to the noises of snoring or just outside. So invest in blackout blinds or blackout curtains, or just get a sleep mask. That's the cheap version. Get some earplugs. It sounds stupid and you probably think you don't need them, but seriously, just try it and see if you do sleep better, because you'll probably feel the difference. It'll cost you a tenner to get a sleep mask and some earplugs. Pretty small price to pay compared to how important sleep is. And third, watch what you don't do more than what you do. So avoid scrolling in bed, right? It might feel like a good way to switch off from work or wind down, but it's actually just continually lighting up your brain with dopamine, which is not going to help you sleep. It's literally the same mechanism as gambling and slot machines looking for the next TikTok or the next reel that's going to entertain you and give you that hit of dopamine. It's a complete time sink. It's so easy to lose an hour or 2 or 3 just mindlessly scrolling. So yeah, be aware of that one. And then watch your caffeine intake as well. It stays in your system a lot longer than you think it does. And the same thing that gives you a boost of energy and stops you feeling tired is obviously the same thing that's going to keep you awake and block you from falling asleep. So a coffee at 6 p.m, half of that is still in you at midnight, which is the same as if you drank half a cup of coffee at midnight, obviously. And last one, go easy on the alcohol. It might feel like it helps you wind down and go to sleep, but it completely destroys the quality of your sleep. You're basically unconscious, which is different from restorative sleep and recovery. So the quickfire questions, right? What if you can't get 8 hours of sleep because of your shifts? Is that game over? No. Just do what your rota allows you to. Keep it consistent, keep the quality up, top yourself up with naps when you can. Work with what you've got instead of chasing some like arbitrary number that you'll never be able to hit. What if you sleep plenty but still feel wrecked? That means that either the bucket is filling faster than it's draining, so you've got too much on, too much stress, or the quality of your sleep is poor. So more hours isn't always the fix. That's when you want to look at those habits. Should you train if you slept badly? Usually, yes. Just maybe dial it back depending how you're feeling. If you literally haven't had a wink of sleep, maybe you want to go lighter or a shorter session or fewer sets. It's not always wise to just pile a huge, heavy session onto a bucket that's already full. Days off, should you lie in or get up at the same time? In an ideal world, you'd get up at the same time because your body likes that consistency and predictability. But sometimes you do need to just catch up on sleep. So a lie-in can really help. Just try to avoid sleeping for more than 2 hours longer than you normally would, because a massive lie-in can throw off your routine and make it harder to sleep the following day. So don't fill the bucket faster than you can empty it. That's the long and short of it here. Rest days are part of the plan. They're not a day off from the plan. And sleep is the tap that drains it. So protect it and prioritize it. But everything that just wrecked your sleep there, the late coffee, the couple of drinks, the hour on your phone in bed, none of that's random. They're a handful of specific habits, and they're not just draining your recovery. They could be putting the brakes on all of your progress as a whole. They can quietly undo all of the work with training and diet and all of the effort you're putting in, which is why this last chapter might matter more than anything else that we've covered so far. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see when people are trying to get in shape. They're showing up to the gym a few times a week. They're making big steps forward with their nutrition, eating healthier, getting more protein, but they're not progressing as quickly as they want to. And 9 times out of 10, it's because they're driving with the handbrake on. They've got a couple of habits which are dragging them down and offsetting all of the positive changes from the new habits that they're working on. Think about it, right? You can have your foot flat to the floor on the accelerator, but if the handbrake is on even slightly, it's going to slow you down quite a lot. And the usual ones are too much caffeine, so the energy drinks, the 5th or 6th coffee of the day, smoking, drinking, the pints after service, the bottle of wine on your day off, scrolling social media, so spending an hour or 2 on your phone every night, and junk food, so snacking, takeaways, giving into cravings. Let's be honest, right? You probably already know that these things aren't doing you any favors, and this is a judgment-free video. You can do what you want. I'm just going to run through these habits in the context of health, fitness, and fat loss. The thing is, right, that list of habits isn't 5 totally separate problems. Most of them are affecting the same key things, and the big one is sleep. So caffeine too late in the day affects your sleep. A few drinks in the evening affects your sleep. An hour on your phone in bed, you guessed it, affects your sleep. And we already know that bad sleep is a disaster for everything you're trying to do and achieve. You recover worse from your training, you're hungrier the next day and you crave more junk food, and it knocks your willpower. So you're more likely to cave on everything else as well. But then there's the impact on your calories and nutrition. So alcohol is just empty calories. But it doesn't stop there, because a few drinks in and you stop caring what you eat. You grab the takeaway, you reach for the snacks. Any hard work trying to eat healthy or stick to a calorie deficit during the week gets completely undone. And junk food is exactly the same. It's way too easy to put away a day's worth of calories in one sitting and not even feel full. And recovery. Smoking impacts your general fitness and how well you bounce back between sessions. Alcohol does the same thing. But the thing that gets the most overlooked is time. 2 hours scrolling on your phone is 2 hours you could have spent in the gym or prepping your food or asleep, recovering. That's what I mean by the handbrake. It's not that these habits are naughty or inherently bad. I'm not judging any of them, but every one of them is undoing the good work that you're putting in everywhere else. You can't out-train bad sleep. You can't out-train drinking or eating junk food. It doesn't matter how good your workouts are. So I want to give you an example of how powerful changing this can be. My client David is a long-haul cabin manager. His life is airports, hotels, and time zones. And he runs events on the side as well. But with those events comes the drinking, the social ritual after a long shift or a busy event, a drink with his partner most evenings to wind down and catch up. None of it felt like much in the moment, but the way it had crept up on him year after year. He was already training in the gym and he was trying to diet, but that was the handbrake slowing him down, undoing the hard work that he was putting into those things. So by focusing on that habit of the drinking, we were able to unblock his progress and he lost 17 kilos over the course of about a year. And there are tons of ways to stop certain habits, but I'm going to run through the 3 main mechanisms behind them and what I've found to be most effective for myself, but with clients like David as well. So the first one is to change your identity. And this sounds a bit weird, but this is the foundation, right? There's a big difference between I'm trying to quit smoking and I don't smoke. You could replace the word smoking there with drinking or caffeine or literally anything. But trying to quit means you're still a smoker, fighting it every day. Smoking is still part of your identity, which puts you at a disadvantage right away. On the flip side though, I don't smoke is a change in identity. You become a non-smoker. So there's no debate about it. Somebody offers you a cigarette, you say no thanks, I don't smoke. Done. You're not having to resist anything because it's not even on the radar. Compared to I'm trying to quit, that leaves the door open. Enough temptation and persuasion and chances are you will cave. So this comes down to deciding you are the person who doesn't do it, rather than the person trying to stop doing it. It is a very small shift and it sounds a bit silly, but it makes quite a big difference. And this is exactly what David did. He didn't say, I'm cutting down on alcohol. He decided that for the first 8 weeks that we were working together, drinking just wasn't on his radar. It wasn't part of who he was anymore. And that removed those small decisions after every event or every evening with his partner out of it. The second thing is to replace the habit. So when you look at those habits, right, they are all just there to scratch an itch. But that means that white knuckling, trying to stop doing them with willpower on its own is going to be extremely difficult. So instead of leaving a gap by just removing the habit altogether, put something in its place that scratches a similar itch. For example, if you're consuming too much caffeine and trying to cut down, swap energy drinks for sugar-free fizzy drink, like Coke Zero, whatever. But you get the same feeling of having a cold, refreshing, fizzy drink, just without the sugar and without the caffeine. And you'll probably even feel a boost of energy from the placebo effect anyway, so that's a nice bonus there. If it's drinking too much coffee, replace that with decaf or just drink more water every time you want to reach for a coffee. The pint after work, the obvious thing would be to replace that with an alcohol-free beer. But also recognize that that is a way of winding down and switching off from work. So you could replace that by going to the gym on the way home, and that becomes your way of switching off from work and getting that out of your head. Smoking, replace with chewing gum. It could even be nicotine gum if you need it. So some of these are already rooted in like proven approaches to stopping smoking, for example. But the swap is about replacing the negative habit with something familiar, but neutral or positive. Same with David, right? That evening drink with his partner was really about connecting and switching off together. So instead of a bottle of wine, they started cooking a nice meal together. Same wind down, same time with his partner, just without the handbrake. And the third thing is to change your environment. So this one is really underrated. Make the habit as difficult to do as possible and you're less likely to do it. So if you walk past the shop on the way home every night and buy drink or buy cigarettes, walk a different way home. Or don't keep any money or cards on you so that you can't buy things if you can. I know that's not always possible. If there's junk food in the cupboard, it's going to get eaten. So don't buy it. Keep it out of the environment. But one thing that I've been trying to cut back on is scrolling. I'll just find myself caught in the trap of doom scrolling on Instagram whenever I'm on my phone. So I tried to cut back by removing the app from my home screen, but then I just default to searching for it instead. I tried to log out of my personal account, so I just used my work one, but then I ended up scrolling on that account instead. So recently, I just deleted the app from my phone. And whenever I do need to use it for work, or if I do just want to scroll my feed for a little bit, I make a conscious choice to re-download the app. I use it for 20 minutes, and then I delete it again. That usually happens about once a day, but that's taken my scrolling time from an hour, 2 hours sometimes, to 20 minutes. But all it does is just add that little bit of friction instead of constantly opening the app, closing it, and then going back on it 2 minutes later. We've all done that before. The point is, we're all lazy. We choose the path of least resistance, especially when we're tired. So use that to your advantage. Make the good choice the easy one and the bad choice a nightmare. One last thing, right? If there's more than one of these habits in your life, don't try to rip all 5 handbrakes off at once. You'll fail at all of them and end up completely giving up. Pick the one that's holding you back the most, the biggest handbrake, and deal with that one first. If you get that sorted, then you can move on to the next. So that's everything there is to know. Training tells your body what to do with everything else that you change. Nutrition is what makes it possible. Recovery is where it actually happens, and the habits are what stop it all leaking away. None of those is complicated on its own. There's nothing in this video that you couldn't start with this week. But I want to be straight with you about why people still don't start. It isn't information. You've got all of that now. I've literally not held anything back from this. It's that doing all 4 of those at the same time for months around a job that fights you on every single one of them is difficult. Late finishes, days off that change constantly, food everywhere, exhausted all the time. That's the real difficulty. And no video is going to fix it on its own. So every client I've showed you today, Scott, Stephen, Jake, Adam, David, none of them were missing information either. What they had was someone checking in, someone adjusting it when the rotor changed, and someone telling them the truth when they were about to give up 6 weeks in for no reason. So if you'd rather not do it on your own, that's exactly what I help with. You can check out the link in the description. That's all I'll say. But if you take one thing from this video, don't wait until you've got it all figured out. Pick the one thing that's most in your way right now and start there this week.